Welcome everyone to the special after show of October LGBTQ news this month. There is so much news this past month, it's ridiculous. We have an update to the Channing suicide story that just came out and is breaking right now. We have other stories that I want to cover, but we didn't really have time in the normal episode to fit them in. So we're going to talk about all of those stories, including Arizona's governor says Christians shouldn't have to serve gays, Uber and Lyft discriminating, federal judge rules anti-LGBTQ churches can be called hate groups, science shows homophobic men are insecure, and U.S. ambassador to the UN says musicals are gay propaganda. There's so much to cover this month. So I think first up we're going to talk about the Channing suicide a little bit, because this one really got to me this past month. It really just hit hard. And what I think a lot of people don't realize is how we do this show means that I don't read the story in its entirety until I'm scripting out the episode. And so I subscribe to a lot of different news networks that are credible and I can trust. And all of those news outlets share stories all month long, and then as I'm going through, I'm reading the headline and maybe the first paragraph, and I'm going, okay, is this story worthy enough to talk about in the show itself? And if it is, then I try to find that same story, but on a different news network, and that way I know, first off, it happened, and I know it's credible, and that way I'm getting you guys even more facts on the story. But I only read like the first paragraph, and I kind of wait for a little bit to read the whole thing. Right before I write the script for our episode every month is when I'll actually read the entire article on both credible news sites, and that way it's fresh in my mind, and I have all of as many facts as I can for you guys, as well as my opinions are fresh, and it's my first initial thoughts of what happened on a majority of the story. So that's typically how the process works for us. And I've been following LGBTQ news for many, many years. It just recently I started talking about it on camera. And then this past month, like a week ago or something like that, one of our fans reached out to us and said, "Are you going to cover this story?" And I was really happy that one of our fans did that. And then I sort of asked myself the question, well, what's in this story, you know? First off, it was already on the docket for our episode for October, but then I go, let me look into it even more. And I started reading this story, and I go, okay, this is absolutely horrible that a 16-year-old committed suicide. And I think every time I go by one of these stories online, it breaks your heart. It tears you down as a human. And I don't know how it can't do that. I mean, if a story like this doesn't break you down and make you at least a little bit tear up, then I don't think you're human anymore. I think you've lost that somewhere. But on this story, as I started reading through it, I just started going, okay, that is horrible, but what happened afterwards was even more horrible, you know? We started hearing all of these things about the district attorney was going out to press and saying, we haven't really decided on whether or not we're going to charge these boys for what they did, and outing this man and making him commit suicide. We're not going to make a comment on whether or not we're going to do that. And then he was telling the family at the same time, we're not going to charge these people with this crime. And so one of two things has to be happening there. Like, the first is you could be lying to the press and saying, you know, I already know that we're not going to charge these boys with this crime, and you're telling the press you're not sure yet, and you're lying to them. And so that means you're not doing your job as district attorney. Or you could be lying to the family, which in any case is much, much, much worse. This family just lost their son, their brother, and now you're lying to them about whether or not the accused are going to be charged and have their day in court, and whether or not they're going to have justice for their son. It's ridiculous. Either way, you don't deserve a job as district attorney. And then I sort of just said to myself, there's more to this story, you know? And I kept reading, and then I heard all of these allegations, and then I was like, okay, there's this 2018 video, which is only a year ago, where the district attorney says that he won't charge domestic violence victims or perpetrators. And it's like, wait, what? You know, just because your personal religious beliefs say that the sanctity of marriage is between a man and a woman doesn't mean the eyes of the law see it that way. We have law is not the Bible in our country, and we have freedom of religion to protect us from people like you as district attorney. So it was very, very horrible to hear that part of the story, and then you, as I did, I mean, I didn't want to believe it at first, so I looked it up on multiple news outlets, and for this specific story, I went ahead and I was like, well, normally the couple news outlets that I look at could be seen to have an LGBTQ bias. So let me look it up on an credible news outlet that isn't involved with LGBTQ at all. And so I did, and multiple other sources are giving the same information of this man is a notorious homophobe, and that's why he's not charging these boys with manslaughter or even harassment, which at the very least it is harassment. That is the law. And so today, as we're like preparing to record the episode for mid-October, all of a sudden more news breaks. And so we have now stuff from the school district that Channing went to. And so that's even more up of what they've done. And I'm sorry for the horrible language. I try to keep this family friendly, but this story is... I hope you guys can agree that it's this bad that I don't want to control my language too much on it. I want to scream at this district attorney. I want to scream at the school district for not doing anything. I want to scream at someone. And yeah, it's just one of those stories. So I hope you can understand that. This is an article that was just put out today from out.com, which some might say has a LGBTQ bias, but again, they're credible, and this is backed up by another news agency already that is completely out of the LGBTQ rights initiative. So basically they interviewed Joshua, who is the, I believe, older brother of Channing. And so Joshua comes on camera and did a couple things for BBC, USA Today, and New York Times. Joshua spoke to CNN on the nightly news and stuff like that on their broadcast with a t-shirt that read Justice for Channing, with the hashtag Justice for Channing. He's been in the media recently for this, and ever since. As Joshua quotes here, quote, "There's a moment in time where there's a window of opportunity," he explains. "In a week or two, everyone's back to the groove of their daily life. I'm going to have to just press the pause button on resting and grieving. Until I see justice brought, I'm not going to quit," which is fantastic words to hear. But unfortunately, I think he's right in this. You know, I can only imagine what it is that their family is going through right now. And to have to go through that in the public eye and also fight for your son and your brother's right to justice and the perpetrators to have their day in court, I think that is just despicable that the system is allowing that to happen and forcing them to go through that. You know, in this article, Joshua talks about how small their little town is and how he had to drive, I believe, over 4 or 5 hours to get to his dad's house that night when Channing committed suicide. And he says that Channing had a job at Burger King because he really wanted to work. He brought him, his dad bought him a motorcycle, a real one. Channing played in a rock band, and his dad bought him a new guitar. From the surface, it looked like everything was okay. In this article, he says that night, when his father spoke to his son for the last time, they didn't fight or quarrel. Channing just scratched the head of his family dog, said goodnight, and went upstairs. Now, hours later, his father told him that he discovered Channing's body. He had shot himself. And he says, although the 16-year-old privately identified as bisexual, confiding in a couple friends at school, Joshua says it would have been a struggle for his brother to be out in a stereotypical southern town. Not even his family knew. So there are a couple students at school who we now know knew that he was bisexual, at least, but which wasn't known at the initial time of when the story all came out. But a couple of them knew, and now we know two of them used it against him. And we know there was a fight that night between one of his friends and him on whatever messaging service, and that's the reason why these two friends decided to out him online. And the next, really messed up part of this story is that after the news broke of Channing taking his own life, the school really missed their mark here as well, and they did some really shady stuff as well. According to Joshua, I'm just going to read the article because they say it a lot better than I'm going to be able to word it here. I'm sorry. But according to Joshua, even Channing's high school has yet to respond meaningfully to his death. After news broke of his brother had taken his own life, Joshua claims administrators at Coffee County Central High School didn't call an assembly to address the incident or provide support for students who were affected. He points out that the school still doesn't have a statement on its website acknowledging Channing's passing. Quote, they did send an email to parents saying that counselors would be available if any kids needed it, Joshua says, but they didn't really have any direct communication with the kids themselves. And that's bad enough on its own for a school to not even acknowledge this happening. And the really messed up part is, you have an entire school now that is trying to grieve in whatever way they can over their classmate who just committed suicide. And not only do you have the family and the close friends who are trying to grieve in whatever way they can and having to put their lives on pause and their grief on pause just so they can get justice for their loved one, you have an entire school that's pretty much doing the same and trying to figure out how to grieve. Because remember, his school classmates were 14 through 18-year-old kids, and they're trying to understand, how do we grieve over this? This is not something you're supposed to know how to do at 14 through 18 years old, And so they're trying to understand, how do we grieve? And they're doing it in the only way they know how. And so they created hashtag Justice for Channing signs in their art class the next day. And they saw Channing's brother Joshua on CNN and with his t-shirt reading hashtag Justice for Channing, and then they went ahead and they took that hashtag and made signs about it, and they were trying to demand justice for their friend as well. And that was so beautiful. But then the principal of their high school decided, rather than letting their kids grieve in whatever way they want to right now, he decided it was important, or she decided it was important enough to stop them from doing that the principal actually confiscated all of those signs and said it won't be allowed anymore in their school to have Justice for Channing signs. And so the next day, the students made homemade t-shirts. And they had Justice for Channing t-shirts on when they went to school the next day with that same slogan. And it's like, how could you tell students, no, you're not allowed to grieve. You're not allowed to show any love for your classmate who has no justice right now. It was so offensive, not only what the DA is doing, but what the principal is doing. And so now it becomes a question of, should the district attorney step down from his position? Should the principal step down from their position? Or is the superintendent of that school district or the governor or whoever going to demand that principal be taken out of office because of their actions here and not letting their students grieve at all? And as Joshua quotes here, after an hour or two after the interview went live on CNN, Joshua said that the school, quote, finally put something on its Facebook page, a graphic that shows the hotline and website for suicide prevention, but that's still not specific about Channing, and they're still not acknowledging Channing's death and suicide. They're just saying, here's the number of the suicide prevention hotline, call it if you need, which is absolutely ridiculous. And the school's Facebook page had over 100 replies on that, and the school, I guess, is refusing to acknowledge it, and they're refusing to comment on any of those replies. And even Joshua says at the very end of this story that he doesn't want Channing's life to be defined by tragedy. He remembers his sibling as, quote, kind and caring, calling him, quote, the kind of kid that would listen to everyone else's problems. Really, I just learned this. I always knew he had a good heart, but immediately after his death, other kids had said that they had had issues with suicide and they would go to Channing. He was the one they would talk to them and help them through their problems. As strange as it is, it ended up being him in the end. So unfortunately, this story has blown up to much more than just Channing. It can't just be a story about a 16-year-old boy who took his own life out of fear of being out to the world and that world not accepting him because of where he lived in the country. It's so sad. That's the option that kids a lot of times go to, is that, you know, rather than being out, they choose to be out of this life. And that's something where we have to support the Trevor Project, and that's why this entire video is going to be, there's links all around the video to support Trevor Project and everything they do, because they help kids in these very specific situations at their what could be their final moments. And I think we need to support them today. I hope that people donate. I hope you guys donate to the Trevor Project. It's important to donate to them, not just now, but every day of the year. It's important, but especially now. And really, again, it's sad. It can't just be about him. Now this story is about the district attorney whose homophobic beliefs mean that he doesn't do his job and charge people with actual crimes. It's now no longer about Channing. It's about these two other boys and friends that won't get charged with manslaughter because the district attorney says, oh, well, it's okay if it was gay, right? It can't be about that. I mean, we have to charge actual criminals with crimes here. And even though I think harassment would be a slap on the wrist. It's a fine, I believe. It's not any jail time at all. It's a fine. So that would be a slap on the wrist. But I think at the very least it would be, hey, you did something wrong. You need to pay for your crime. At the very least here, even if the DA doesn't charge in the end these boys with manslaughter, I think they're going to forever go on living knowing that this is what they did. And so I hope they have learned their lesson from this. I don't think they will if they're not charged, though. So that's a sad part of the story, and now it becomes a story about the principal being homophobic and saying that the students can't grieve, which is so messed up. You shouldn't be a principal if you can't help your students grieve, and if you won't allow them to grieve over this kind of situation. It is so messed up in every single way. Everywhere that the people involved in this story could have messed up, they found a way to mess up. And I think we can all agree at this point of what happened there. So now it's a story about we need to see if the DA will actually charge. If they won't, if he won't charge these boys with a crime, will he resign? I don't think so, because in the past, I mean, Iran and Islamic countries have asked him to resign over his post about Middle Eastern countries and religions. He hasn't done that, so I don't think we're gonna see him resign anytime soon. Unfortunately, I really hope so. I'm calling for it. I want him to resign because this is not doing his job. If he charges them with manslaughter and lets those kids have a day in court, charged as adults, by the way, because they are 16 as well, from what I've heard, then that is letting the process handle these kids. By the way, it doesn't mean that they're going to be convicted of these crimes. I think just bringing them into court and saying they deserve their day in court for what they've done. And the court needs to prove that they did these things, but there is ample evidence they did. So I think it's fairly straightforward, and I think they'll be easily convicted if they're brought on these charges, but I think he needs to do his job or he needs to resign. And I mean, then you have a principal who says, hey, we're not going to let the kids grieve in the way that they want to grieve or in a way that they know how to grieve. So, unfortunately, I think you're going to see a lot more news about this story as time goes on here, and we'll certainly be keeping updates on this story as it goes on, as we hear about them. Any updates will probably be shared first on our Facebook page over at Powered by Rainbows. I'm definitely going to be covering this story, hopefully with some better news next time. This month on our October show, we're going to be covering this story in a little bit of depth compared to this separate thing, and we're going to be covering a whole lot more on this, hopefully in November when more updates come out on this. So this probably won't be the last of it, but there's also a slight chance that this will be the last of it, unfortunately, that no one's going to resign over this whole issue and for not doing their jobs, and no charges are going to be filed. So I don't think this is the last time we've heard from Joshua. I think Joshua is going to keep pushing for these charges to be brought up, and I think he's going to keep pushing the school to do better, and I think that's fantastic. Unfortunately for him, he has to go through that and grieve at the same time and put his grief on pause. So I'm terribly sorry to him to have to go through that, but I do want to thank him for being so strong and much stronger than I would be in this situation, to keep pushing and keep fighting on, even though you desperately want to grieve over your brother. And so just know, to the entire family of Channing, our hearts, our prayers are with you, and we're so sorry this happened. Yeah. And it's one of those days where you just make sure your kids know that you love them. Make sure that your students know that you love them, and make sure that you hug your friends at school, and not just your friends. I mean, make sure that every classmate knows that their life is worth living. I think this happens far too often in our country. We talk about mass shootings all the time, but suicide happens far too often in our country to not have schools do anything about it. I think our school system needs to do a better job of teaching kids, if this is the way you're feeling, call me. Or here's a prevention hotline to call and help you with that situation. And I'm terribly, terribly sorry to Channing's family that the school system let him down here. And that those friends, even if you want to call them friends, did that to him, and forced him to commit suicide. So, unfortunately, that is how we're ending this story. Make sure the people in your life know that you love them. And now to some other news. Arizona Governor Republican Doug Ducey says that Christians shouldn't have to serve gays. He says, quote, "I think we've got a lot of laws. I've been more in the business of wanting to repeal laws and regulations. Arizona, by the way, has laws and regulations prohibiting discrimination based on race, sex, national origin, and religion, but not sexual orientation or gender identity, which Doug Ducey doesn't believe should be a law. For some really weird reason, he doesn't want any of those things to be a law. So because laws aren't good in this country, apparently. And what this all is basically revolving around is the fact that Doug Ducey says businesses should be allowed to deny housing, jobs, and services to LGBTQ people, and that is based on a court case that is between a same-sex couple who was getting married, and they were denied service by a Phoenix-based stationery company, and the court ruled in favor of the religious right of the stationery company to not serve the same-sex couples. Ducey praised the ruling, even though it opens the door to anti-LGBTQ discrimination in other areas and weddings. This story is kind of surprising in a way, and it's surprising every time one of these kind of stories hits the media and it gets blown up. First off, there should be laws in our country on a federal level to protect everyone, and there should be an Equality Act. There is not an Equality Act, and some people want to say, oh, there's things hidden in the Equality Act, which there's clearly not, but people want to say that all they want. But Equality Act will be signed eventually. It's just a matter of time. And who's going to be the one to be on the right side of history and sign it? So that is definitely something we need in our country, not just the state level, but apparently states don't have to listen to rulings of the federal government and marriage equality, so why not this? So anyway, it's kind of surprising every time one of these stories hits, because I get it. As a member of the LGBTQ, I don't want to be denied service. If I'm at a restaurant with a boyfriend or something, and I'm holding his hand, I don't want to be thrown out of the restaurant, right? I think that's completely wrong. I don't think businesses should be able to do that. I have that mindset that, hey, my money is as green as the next guy. No matter if I'm straight, gay, whatever, I'm still paying you the same price as anyone else. So it doesn't make sense to me that a business would deny someone for being gay or trans or anything. Because as a business owner, I say, you know what, like, your money's still green, and I still got bills to pay as a business owner. So, yeah, give me your business. I would love your business, no matter who you are, or who you love, or what gender you identify as. So it's so messed up to me, that side of things, but it's also messed up, and I see it from the perspective of not necessarily the business, but still as the gay person who says, why are we fighting so hard for this? I get that you're fighting for your rights as an LGBTQ person, and I get that what a massive precedent it would set for our country if you won your court case, but you have to sort of take a step back and understand what I'm fighting for here is to give money to a homophobe. And let me explain that just a second, because let's say you walk into a catering company or a stationery company or a tent event company. I've heard people who walk into a photographer's studio or a videographer's office and they are denied service because they are gay. And first off, you should know there are many options in any of those facets of the wedding industry, including my company. I'm not just trying to shout out my own company for business reasons. I promise you, there are gay companies out there who are owned by gay people who support same-sex marriage. So there are plenty of us out there that can serve you. It's not like you only have one option on anything that you want. Catering doesn't, tents, venues, doesn't matter. You have options, right? And if you're denied service, which I think is wrong in the first place, by the way, but if you are, that means the person denying you service is a homophobe, and they don't think you legally have the right to be married. And so it fascinates me when someone fights and says, no, now I'm going to fight for you to be at my wedding. Because, again, I side with the notion that, hey, no one should be able to deny service to a gay couple, but I also see it as, do I really want a homophobe at my wedding? No. Why am I going to fight so hard on this? Yes, it would set a precedent, but also I don't want that person at my wedding anymore. I want to go to the next company over that does just as great of a job, if not for a better price, and they support me. They love me. And they're happy to take my business. Why do I want to support a homophobe? So I see it from both perspectives here. I would love to know your thoughts on this story in the comments, as well as every other story we do. I would love to know your thoughts on it. But I don't think it's right, again, that a company could deny service, but I also see it from two different perspectives there. Next story up is from Uber and Lyft, discriminating against their LGBTQ passengers. Chris Parker, who is an assistant professor of information technology and analytics at American University, has headed a study this past month showing that riders who are perceived to be people of color and LGBTQ supporters are, quote, canceled on more frequently before pickup than white and perceivably straight passengers. After he did his whole report on this and handed it over to NBC, NBC apparently did their own study on this and said in their report, quote, after 3,200 observations during both peak and non-peak hours of the day, the researchers determined that while there was no significant evidence of bias against women riders compared to male riders of both races, both black men and black women were nearly 3 times more likely to be canceled on than their white peers. Their test also showed that signaling support for the LGBTQ community with a rainbow filter, I guess in your profile pic, resulted in the passenger nearly doubling their chance of being canceled on across races. Now, Uber and Lyft, with this report out there, are saying that they will review their policies and their practices for their drivers, but I don't know if it's as easy as they think of a fix here. If you're not aware, Uber and Lyft are both ride platforms on apps that you can download on your phone, on Android or iOS devices, I believe, and you download this app and you tell the app, I want to go from this location to this location, and it gets you a driver in the area. And basically, drivers could be anyone. It doesn't have to be a licensed taxi driver, which is a whole other court case that happened in New York City, I believe. But anyone can sign up to be a driver, and an employee make extra money for them, as long as they have a nice car and they have a proper license and all this other stuff. So they do some vetting for their employees as Uber and Lyft, but apparently not enough. And what the real problem here is that, I mean, as a driver, you could say, I don't want this person in my vehicle, and Uber and Lyft don't really have to have a policy against that, because it's your personal feelings towards whether or not you're uncomfortable in that situation. So maybe they can change their policies to say if you're gay or trans, or if you're an African American in our country and you want to get a ride on Uber and Lyft, there's a check mark box that you have to check off in the app that selects drivers who are more open to that, maybe, which I don't think is completely fair, but I think that's the only way that Uber and Lyft can solve this, is if they have something in their app that allows the user and the patrons to say, I'm gay, I want drivers that are okay with that. And again, this goes into whether or not a business should deny service for anyone, but this is a societal issue now where our kids are growing up in a world where racism and homophobia and transphobic beliefs are still prevalent in our society. And so I don't think this is something that Uber and Lyft can solve so easily, or can solve without a lot of controversy over what they're doing to solve it. And so Because even if they do have a checkmark box in their app, they're going to get backlash for that. But at the same time, I don't know how else they would solve it. I'm hoping they have some other solution that's better, but we shall have to wait and see what their solution is for this. But I think it's mostly just a societal issue where a driver is growing up in a world where they're afraid of an African American or afraid of a gay person or whatever. So it's going to be very interesting to see how this story progresses. Next up is a federal judge rules anti-LGBTQ churches can be called hate groups, which was a massive win this past month. So this is all revolving around a church in Florida called D. James Kennedy Ministries, which has a corporate entity called Coral Ridge Ministries Media Incorporated. So they are firstly admitting the fact that they are a for-profit entity, which is kind of funny in and of itself, but they were a part of Amazon's giving programs and GuideStar Grantmaker. So basically what those two are, if you're making a purchase on Amazon, you can choose to donate an extra $1 or whatever to an Amazon giving partner and a nonprofit that you want to give to that's registered with Amazon. And there's also this program called GuideStar that helps nonprofits get in contact with grant makers and get more money, basically, and help them with whatever their cause is, right? So this church and this corporate entity were a part of this giving program and grants, which was very debatable whether or not it should have been a thing or not in the first place. So this church and the corporate entity were notoriously anti-LGBTQ. And so the Southern Poverty Law Center called them out for it and said that they are a hate group in their reports and online and stuff like that. So in a statement, SPLC President Richard Cohen said, quote, "The fact that Coral Ridge claims its statements about the LGBT community are biblically based doesn't immunize it from criticism. We have the First Amendment right to express our opinions, just as Coral Ridge has a right to express its opinions." Coral Ridge Ministries Incorporated sued SPLC for this, and they sued Amazon. I'm guessing they sued SPLC for defamation of character or whatever, or slander, because of being called a hate group. And they sued Amazon because after being called a hate group, Amazon dropped them from being a part of their giving program. And they weren't able to accept charitable donations from Amazon anymore. But they lost their case in a federal court where a federal judge ruled that anti-LGBTQ churches can in fact be called hate groups legally under the law. So it was a massive win for legal terminology from here on out. So that was something that was a good story to hear this past month. Next up is a story that is about homophobic men are scientifically now proven to be insecure. A new study published by Sex Roles studied 387 straight men. And the study quotes, "Men scoring higher in precarious manhood beliefs, PMBs as they call it, express amusement with sexist and anti-gay humor, but not other forms of humor, in response to masculinity threat in order to reaffirm their masculinity." That was just a really good, feel-good story this month of, basically the report. It's a really long report, but it says, hey, the more homophobic people that straight men were, the more insecure they were about their own feelings, and so it sort of reaffirms what we all kind of knew for a very long time, but it just now has scientific data behind it, so that's kind of really cool to hear about. Next up is the U.S. ambassador to the UN says that musicals... Can you read my mind of what I'm going to say next? Says that musicals are gay propaganda. I bet you didn't think that was where we were going with this story. Where are we at in our country that this is what we're talking about right now? So this story includes Tom Perkins, who is the president of Family Research Council, who is very upset about the U.S. ambassador's Samantha Power for taking some of her colleagues, some other ambassadors from other countries, to a lesbian-themed Tony Award-winning Broadway musical called Fun Home while they were in the UN, I believe, in New York. So he took to the internet, and here's what he said, quote, "On Tuesday, Power," who is Samantha Power, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, decided to spend her influence persuading them, meaning other ambassadors from other countries, on the need to celebrate homosexuality. This week, she hosted 15 UN ambassadors at a gay Broadway musical called Fun Home. Representatives from Russia, Namibia, and other more culturally conservative countries sat through New York's latest sexual propaganda, followed by a proper thank you from Power herself. Power said in a quote on stage, "Thank you," she told the cast, "for bringing all of this home in a way that resolutions and statements never can. It was a stunning display of political tone deafness considering the real crisis happening right now on the real world stage. Unfortunately, as far as the president is concerned, the most urgent message America can send to its international community right now is that, quote, protecting the rights of LGBT people will remain a key foreign policy priority of the United States," which, by the way, I'm just going to stop. It is not a policy of the United States right now. That is something that President Trump is not doing. Clearly not doing. He is making it a foreign policy to make discrimination a heck of a lot easier in our country. So that is a false statement right there. I just want to stop and tell you guys the facts of what's actually happening, not just opinions. And quote, "It's only a priority seemingly. While the world has experienced the largest forced migration since World War II, the White House can't bring itself to say much about the persecution endured by men and women of faith." So he's saying that basically because this woman, ambassador to the UN, decided to take other ambassadors to a Broadway musical, that somehow, like, great. If it changes their mind and helps those countries be less homophobic, that's fantastic. How is that a bad thing? And he's saying the persecution endured by men and women of faith, as if we're coming after them for their faith. We're not coming after them for their faith. We're coming after our own rights as humans to live. In some other countries, like, for instance, if he wants to call them out, Russia and Namibia, I know in Russia, at least, you're imprisoned for being gay. So it's the tone deafness of this Tom Perkins is just really sad. I mean, where has the news gone this month? I feel like, in many ways, more than most months, we cover just a wide range of stories. But I try to, bring to light really good feel-good stories sometimes, just because when I'm writing a script in a show, I'll cover a really bad story, and then I'll feel the need myself to talk about a good story, a good heartfelt story, like a Pride marching band or something like that, and or Marvel announcing a first gay superhero. This month there was just so much bad that I don't want people out there to be just become so accepting to homophobia and transphobic beliefs that this becomes normal. This is not normal. Homophobia and transphobic beliefs are so wrong in many ways. Factually and just beliefs wise. I mean, I truly don't understand homophobia and transphobic beliefs to the fullest extent, because in order to understand them, you have to be tone deaf to evidence. You have to be tone deaf to science and education and so many things and facts. It's a really sad month, and I wish there was a really good feel-good story that I can end this entire program with. I mean, there are good stories this month. You know, anti-LGBTQ churches were allowed to be called hate groups. We had a pride at a university by a marching band that was in protest of a anti-gay school. Even though that was really like a sad story in itself, because, you know, there's an anti-gay school. Everything this month. There's so little good to talk about this month. I don't want you guys to think that there's just bad, because there's truly good out there. There's good people doing great things. Next month we are starting an initiative that is just the most massive thing we've ever taken on as people. I'm trying right now to partner with some very massive groups to help me with that initiative. And I'm still trying to hear back from them. I'm still contacting a couple of them. That's all going to be happening next month, so I'll probably be talking about that a lot on next month's program. But as for this month, there's a lot about to talk about, and I'm sorry you kind of had to sit through it if you sat through it. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff. So look forward to next month where we talk about better things and hopefully better news. Hopefully there's justice for Channing. Hopefully there's some feel-good stories for y'all to hear about this month. I'm sorry for so much bad, but thank you all for joining us for the after show. This is the first time we've ever had an after show for LGBT news on our program, so let us know in the comments whether or not you liked having an after show. Thanks for sticking around for so long, because I know it's going to be a longer episode tonight, and I know it's going to be a longer episode today, so thanks for tuning in, thanks for sticking around for the entire thing, and join us all next time here on PBR. We have right now, this entire month, we have daily episodes on LGBTQ History Month. We have special episodes coming out all month long. We have other programming on our other channels here at MHP TV. We have Halloween parades coming up on MHP TV local channel, if you like seeing those. We have also, we're doing an election night coverage for the first time ever, live from the MHP TV studios right here in Minersville. We're doing an entire live broadcast all night long on that. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be really exciting. And then I believe it's the next Friday after the election, the Friday after the election, when we announce our big plans that I've been working on for quite a number of months now. So stay tuned for that. There's very big things happen, and I don't want to talk about it too much, but and so I feel like you deserve some sort of hint at this point for sticking around so long. So what it is a movement that, if it works out, it will change the way we do things. And not here at PBR, but the way we do things in the country. And so hopefully it's going to change the world. But right now we're starting small, and we're hinting online a lot of one small step for man, because if you're not familiar with that quote, it's by Neil Armstrong on the moon, who said, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. So what we're doing right now is one small step for man, and we're hoping that it creates the change that will be one giant leap for mankind. So stay tuned for all of that coming in early October on our channel here, so subscribe for that. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and also share this video with others. Thank you all so much for joining us. I'm Matt Haslam. This has been PBR, and have a great day, everyone. Bye for now, and happy National LGBTQ History Month, and happy Equality Day last week. So many things exciting about this. So thank you all for joining us, and see us next time. Bye for now. If you have any thoughts on any of the stories we shared, have any questions or stories you think we missed this past month, please do leave those in the comments down below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our network for plenty more great gay content to come in the future, and share this video with others. I'm Matt Haslam, this has been PBR, and have a gay day, everyone. Bye for now.